This car was built for war, but it couldn't even pass basic tests. The Army turned it down. And that's exactly where the story gets interesting. Because instead of failing, it became a symbol of freedom, beaches, and a carefree life. This is the Mini Moke. And this is one of the strangest stories in automotive history. Late 1950s, the British Army is looking for a lightweight vehicle, something that can be dropped from an aircraft straight into a combat zone, small, simple, and reliable. The man behind the project is Alec Isagonis, the engineer who created the Mini and completely changed the automotive world. Now he's trying to do the same thing, but for the military. The idea seems perfect. Take the Mini's mechanical components, an 848cc transverse engine, a 4-speed gearbox, simple suspension, and put the most basic body on top. No doors, no roof, essentially just a platform on wheels. The car turns out incredibly light, around 400 kilograms. So light that promotional materials show 4 soldiers lifting it and carrying it by hand. Not pushing, not dragging, actually carrying it. In 1959, a prototype called the Buckboard is presented to the British Army. And that's when the first twist comes. The Army says no. The reason is simple: ground clearance. The car sits too low and gets stuck easily off-road. And with just 34 horsepower, it simply isn't powerful enough for serious military use. And this is where the story really gets interesting. Instead of shutting the project down, the engineers keep going. They improve the suspension, increase the wheel size, and then do something completely unexpected. They add a second engine, one in the front, one in the rear, both the same 848cc units. The driver could engage the rear engine with a separate lever, effectively all-wheel drive, but in the most unconventional way possible. Power doubles, and the car finally starts performing the way it was meant to. This version gets the nickname Twini Moke. In 1963, it's shown to the U.S. Army. During testing, a journalist loads it with hay bales in snowy conditions, and it handles it without a problem. And even then, the U.S. Army says no. 2 prototypes, 2 rejections. At that point, it becomes clear. As a military vehicle, the Moke has no future. So the company makes the only decision left. They try to sell it to civilians. January 1964. The British Motor Corporation plant in Cowley begins producing the Austin Mini Moke. The name Moke comes from Old British slang for a donkey, a simple, hard-working animal. And honestly, it fits. Base price, £405. For that, you get an engine, 4 wheels, and a flat metal floor. Passenger seats? Extra. A removable canvas roof? Extra. A heater? Extra. Windshield wiper? Of course, extra. And this is where the problem begins. British authorities classify the Moke as a passenger car, which means higher taxes. Suddenly, it becomes too expensive for the very people it was meant for: farmers and small businesses. Sales in the UK collapse. Of nearly 15,000 cars produced by 1968, only about 1 in 10 stays in the UK. The factory shuts down. It looks like the end. But it isn't. The Moke simply finds its place somewhere else. In 1966, production moves to Australia, and everything changes. The car gets larger 13-inch wheels instead of the tiny 10-inch ones. Ground clearance improves, and it finally becomes usable on rough terrain. The engine grows too, first to 998cc, then to 1,275cc, reaching speeds of around 130 kilometers per hour. And most importantly, it finds its audience: surfers, tourists, beach resorts. By 1981, over 26,000 Mokes are built in Australia. Later, production continues in Portugal, another 10,000 units. In total, around 50,000 cars worldwide. Not bad, for a donkey the Army didn't want. While the Moke was conquering Australian beaches, something else was happening in London. 1964. The city is alive: music, fashion, art. And this small, open car suddenly becomes perfect for people who are tired of the ordinary. George Harrison buys one. His wife, Patty Boyd, later writes that he would pick up guests in it. No roof, no doors, and everyone loved it. The Beatles are photographed with a Moke on King's Road in Chelsea. a car with no doors, and the Beatles. That alone is enough to make history. Brigitte Bardot is photographed in one on the French Riviera, and at that moment, the Moke stops being just a vehicle. It becomes a symbol of a lifestyle, sun, freedom, and that feeling of having nowhere you need to be. But the most unexpected appearance of the Moke isn't on a beach. In 1967, the British TV series The Prisoner is released. It tells the story of a secret agent taken to a mysterious village, beautiful, almost like a resort, but impossible to escape. And right there are the Mokes, small white cars with striped canopies, working as taxis while also keeping control. There's a certain irony in that. A car that became a symbol of freedom now turned into a tool of control. Only 4 Mokes were used for filming. 2 survive today. 1 was sold at auction in 2021 for nearly £70,000. A car with no doors, for that kind of money. And one more thing. The Moke appears in James Bond films. In Live and Let Die, Roger Moore drives a white Moke through a Caribbean island filmed in Jamaica. In total, this car has appeared in over 70 films. 70 films. A car with no doors. Think about that. If you look at the Moke without all that history, it's about as simple as a car can get. The body is basically a flat floor and 2 metal sections along the sides. No complex parts, nothing unnecessary. All the mechanicals come from the Mini, which means one thing. Parts were everywhere. That's exactly why the Moke worked so well in places where other cars would have been a problem. Islands, resorts, coastal towns, where simplicity matters more than power. And it was incredibly light. If it got stuck, you could just pull it out. There's one more thing everyone who's driven a Moke mentions. The feeling. Low seating, open sides, wind in your face, the road right there. It feels less like driving a car, and more like something between a car and a go-kart. If I'm honest, the Mini Moke is one of the strangest vehicles we've ever covered. It was built for war, but it wasn't needed there. The Army turned it down, and they had their reasons. But it did something else. It found its place, not on the battlefield, but where people simply feel good. And maybe that's exactly why it's still remembered today. And the story didn't end there. In 2015, the brand was revived, and today the Moke is back in production, even as an electric vehicle, the same car the Army once rejected. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And in the comments, what matters more to you, being the strongest or finding your place?